Hey, good morning. This is Jamie with Stonemeyer Games, and I'm joining you on Wednesday, May 13th for this week's Facebook Live chat. I'm here as usual to share what I'm working on at Stonemeyer Games, discuss some random topics, some of which have to do with gaming and Stonemeyer Games, some of which don't really have anything to do with that. Just having fun chatting with you, and to answer, of course, any question that you have. Feel free to ask me anything, and I'm happy to answer it. If I happen to miss your question, it's not that I'm ignoring it. It's just that I missed it. Feel free to ask it again. I'll give it another shot. So one thing I'm really excited about today is tonight is the Survivor season finale of season 40. This is an all-winner season that I've really been enjoying. I think it has exposed some slight weaknesses in Survivor, but I still love it. I love every season of Survivor, and I can't wait to watch the finale tonight. So I'm curious if you are planning to do that as well. I see some friendly faces joining us this morning, including my coworker, Joe. Joe, thanks for chiming in here. So Survivor's tonight. Normally I've been doing Zoom game nights every other Wednesday, but I'm impatient to watch the Survivor finale, so I don't want to not watch it tonight. So I'll do that tonight. We'll do game night next week. And last week on Thursday, another friend who used to host game nights on Thursday started doing a virtual game night on Thursday for heavier games. We've been doing like lighter games over Zoom on my Wednesday game nights. And so last week I played Russian Railroads on Board Game Arena, which it's been a while since I played that. I really, really enjoyed it. Love Russian Railroads. And I'm looking forward to playing either that or maybe Terra Mystica or Tzolk'in on Board Game Arena tomorrow at our heavier game night. So I'm curious if you have gotten any, in these times where it's maybe a little bit difficult to play heavier games with more people than just the people in your household, if you found a good format for doing so. I appreciate Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator. I think they're great, but they can take a long time to play. For example, Russian Railroads. We played Russian Railroads on Board Game Arena in about an hour and a half, including some teaching for one person who had never played and a refresher for the two of us who hadn't played in a while. Meanwhile, a 3-player game on Tabletopia, or maybe Tabletop Simulator, one of the two, Tabletopia, I think, was going on of Paladins of the West Kingdom, and it took 4 hours. And that is a game that usually only takes 90 minutes. It's just the physics engine of Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator are fantastic. They're incredible, but they can also take a lot more time than a fully programmed version like on Board Game Arena. Yeah. Tony says he's working from home and he's starting to associate the Price is Right theme as his Stonemeyer Games chat reminder. Nice, Tony. Chad says, any plans for a playtest session coming up for Rolling Realms? Yes, Chad, I'm glad you asked this. Megan actually just asked me the same question. And I am going to be teaching and playing version 10 of Rolling Realms next Tuesday, but not as usual on the Stonemeyer Games page. Instead, I'll be playing with the Board Game Geek folks who have the Board Game Geek TV channel. Lincoln is the one that contacted me. There are, I think, 3 other regulars on that show, and they've been playing games like this with people right now over on live. And so there will be a live play next Tuesday in the early afternoon. I will share it on the Stonemeyer Games page when I get a link. I think they'll use Twitch to do it, and so I'll share a link to that. And so, yes, I will be doing that next Tuesday in the early afternoon for Rolling Realms version 10. So I don't plan on changing it at all up until that point or until after that playtest in case I feel like there's something that needs to be changed. So feel free to go ahead and print it out and get familiar with that new version. There are only a few changes on it anyway, but Scythe in particular changed quite a bit. Oregon says, what other publishers do you like a lot in terms of having beautiful minis and other components and having really friendly, helpful staff to work with designers? I appreciate you attributing those traits with us. We don't actually, beautiful minis aren't really a part of our philosophy, but beautiful components are in general. I think minis are one of many different beautiful components. Like viticulture, we have little custom buildings, custom meeples. I think that is aesthetically pleasing as well, in addition to meeples. But what are some other companies? I actually did a blog post on this a few months ago. Let me see if I can find the link. I used the framework of Instagram. Yeah, here we go. So it was called 20 Instagram Strategies and My Recommendations. And what I did is I took companies that are fairly similar to Stonemeyer Games in terms of their philosophies for generally staying pretty small and focused, for being friendly and having great outreach with people, and for a focus on beautiful games. And there's quite a few of them, really. I mean, I came up with 20 off the top of my head for Instagram, and how their Instagram strategies differ from ours or are similar to ours. I'll post a link. I just posted a link in the comments below, so feel free to check that out. Cynthia says, do I only play live games or do I also play asynchronous games? You know, usually in the past when I've played digital games, I've only played against the AI. So I haven't even dealt with any other human player interaction. Lately, because I've been missing connecting with friends over gaming, I have been playing live games, but not asynchronous. I think I've really only played live games, because that way it really feels like I'm there with my friends and we're talking live as it's happening. But I appreciate the asynchronous option for some games as well. I think Charterstone has that option in Charterstone Digital. Chris says he loved hearing about you playing games with your family on Zoom. Yeah, Mother's Day was on Sunday this past week, and so I got together with, I hosted a Zoom call for Megan's parents and my parents, and we all got together and basically mostly just talked for a while. Oh, and Megan's brother and fiance were there too. We mostly just talked. It was the first time the parents had ever interacted with each other directly. And so we talked for a while, and we also played a round of just one, which went over very well. I think everyone had fun doing that. So Chris says he also enjoyed hearing how I was adopted. I was adopted when I was a little baby, 3 days old. He said, I would love to see a blog post on that that would encourage to adopt. I actually do have a number of blog posts about that, Chris. I appreciate your interest in the topic. If you go to jamiestegmeyer.com, I think it's on the About page, there are a bunch of articles about my adoption experience there and my perspective on adoption. So feel free to check that out. That isn't something that I post on Stonemaier Games, just because it's not related to entrepreneurship, but it is something that I talked about, and I try to be quite open about it because it's been a huge and wonderful part of my life that I had a biological mother who was willing to give birth to me, and I have wonderful parents who decided to make me their first child. So it's been a great blessing for my life, and feel free to check out articles on that on jamiestegmeyer.com. Let me look over at my topics real quick, although you guys are actually prompting me for many of my topics, which included Mother's Day, and I already talked about the Survivor finale. We've watched a few movies recently. We rewatched Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, Rise of the Skywalker, or Rise of Skywalker, whatever the final title is, episode 9. And my impression of it stayed pretty much the same as it was in theaters, which I thought it was a perfectly fine ending to the series. I think it felt like 2 movies crammed into one, which is unfortunate because I think J.J. Abrams was kind of making up for episode 8 a little bit, but I still enjoyed it. And I also watched Downton Abbey last night. We were looking for a kind of a romantic comedy style movie, which wasn't quite Downton Abbey. It wasn't a romantic comedy, but it still had some comedic elements. I had never seen the show before, but Megan knew the show quite well. And but it was still a solid movie. I really enjoyed seeing it. It's I don't always enjoy period piece movies, but it was so well done. The production quality and the drama in the show was so fun to watch that I really did enjoy it. I'm curious if any of you have seen the movie or seen the show. Do you think they'll do more movies, or do you think that'll be the only one? The movie didn't really make me want to go back and watch the show because I liked how it was kind of condensed into a movie form. I got what I wanted out of it, but I can understand how people would really enjoy the drama of the show as well. Lex says, have I heard of Vorpal Board? It's in closed beta right now, and I'm going to be playing Root on it tomorrow. He's super excited to play a heavier game again. I think I've seen Vorpal Board. I saw a post, I think on Twitter about it this morning or yesterday. We are working with a company that I think has something similar to Vorpal Board called Playtable for one of our games. I don't think I'm supposed to say which one yet, so I won't say. But we are working with, I think, a very similar thing to Vorpal Board called Playtable. Let's see. Steven says Paladins can take normally longer than 90 minutes, which, yeah, I can see. I think our first game, our learning game of Paladins, took about 2 hours. And maybe it does take more than 2 hours. But their Tabletopia version of the game, and with just 3 players, took 4 hours, which is, I think, a little, maybe at least an hour longer than most games of Paladins ever take. Renee mentions that the Wingspan demo Wingspan is demoing on Steam today. Yeah, I was excited to see that. I find out about these digital things at the same time that you do. And so I was excited to see that Monster Couch is moving forward with it. I think they want to do Wingspan fans justice with this Wingspan digital release. And so they're spending extra time, I think, beyond what they thought they would spend to get it right. But I'm glad they're taking steps forward with this demo version. Let me jump over to my topics real quick. Some other games I've been playing. I mentioned Russian Railroads last week. Megan and I finished our Machikoro campaign, Machikoro Legacy, and enjoyed it. It actually ended up making my top 10 favorite Japanese-themed games list, which you will see on Sunday this week. That's my Sunday sit-down video coming up. And we also have been playing through some of the Chronicles in Glenmore 2, the Glenmore 2 Chronicles. We played the Loch Ness Monster, the Nessie Chronicle, which was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed that. And then we played the Highlander expansion, which had a pretty ridiculous component in it, but it didn't add much to the game. So I think some of the Chronicles may be a little hit and miss, but it also didn't hurt from the game. It was a fun little addition to try out. I asked on Instagram about people's favorite Chronicles. Feel free to mention yours in the comments below. And a few people mentioned the Haggis version. So I'm actually curious to maybe try that one next and see how that is. I've also tried the whiskey version, which has my name in it. It was very slightly inspired by me, which is really cool to see that in a game from a completely different publisher. What else did we play? Did we play anything else? I'm probably forgetting something. Just one on Mother's Day. I think that was it. Yeah, we've been focusing mostly on finishing Machikoro and playing a few games at Glenmore. Chris says he saw the picture of sunglasses on Walter, and this is another Instagram reference. If you go to Instagram at Jamie Stegmeyer, you can see a really adorable photo of Walter kind of wearing sunglasses. Walter's my cat, one of my cats. Chris says, have I ever put outfits on them? I have tried early on in Biddy's life. I tried to put like probably a hat or something like that on him. Walter, I think I've tried the same with Walter. Biddy will shrug it off right away. He hates it. Walter will kind of put up with things being put on him temporarily, but not things that entrap him. Let's see. I would scroll down, look for. I'm behind on questions a little bit, so I'll scroll down a little bit here. Max says, what is a rule of a board game that you've been playing wrong for a long time? Actually, yeah, I'm going to do a video on Shobu soon. Shobu isn't the game that I played all that much, but we played it at Geekway Mini a few times a few months ago, and we realized that after both plays, we played a certain rule wrong, and I'm almost worried to talk about it now, talk about the game on video, because I'm worried that I'll still discuss the rule wrong. It was something to do with the mirroring. I think we mirrored it the wrong way, but it didn't end up. We still had a good time with the game, but I am worried that that's one that I don't even know if I can do a video about because I missed such a crucial rule, but still had a very good experience with it. I just don't want to misspeak about it on video. Mackenzie says, asks if St. Louis is having as nice a weather as she is having today. And no, it's kind of cloudy and overcast today, and we have thunderstorms over the next few days. So it's a little bit, weather's not great today, but it was great for a couple days. And next week, I think it gets nice again. Yeah, Connor chimed in that Facebook changed their live requirements and that I'm updating Chrome like he just had to. Yeah, Connor, I saw that you were just live a minute ago. And I tried to get on live a few minutes ago, and it told me, I think, the same thing that you got, that Chrome needs to be updated before live can work. So I had to revert to a previous version of Facebook Live to get this to run. And then after this, I'll update Chrome and get that working, hopefully. Sorry, you had to run into that too. Roger says, design question. During the development of Wingspan, how did Elizabeth and you go about balancing the bird cards? Yeah, so this is all Elizabeth. I chimed in from an anecdotal perspective where I perceived something, and that's largely what I do during development. I let the designers largely handle the math behind balancing, and I chime in from a perspective of almost a consumer, of a gamer. I say, even though I know this is balanced, it doesn't feel like it is. So let's figure out what that means. But Elizabeth has a huge master spreadsheet of all the birds that factors in everything, factors in the number of eggs a bird can hold, it factors in their endgame points, their abilities, how many habitats they can be played into, their food cost, their wingspan plays into it a little bit. All these different factors go into this huge spreadsheet to determine, I think usually the spreadsheet is geared towards determining the points that the bird should be worth at end of game. But yeah, she has a big spreadsheet to do that. Ephraim says, I know there's an upcoming expansion for Wingspan. Yeah, Wingspan Oceania is one that we're working on. Any plans on making a legendary box for it? So what we're doing, our plan for Wingspan is to publish one expansion for every continent in the world. We started with North America in the core game. We went to Europe. Now we're going to Australia, New Zealand, that area of the world, and then we'll go elsewhere. And eventually, yes, I will say at this point that while we don't have any plans to do it, we are committed to making a big box to hold all Wingspan stuff and organize it really well. But we're not going to do that until we know what all that stuff is. And while Elizabeth and I have discussed a rough plan for what will go into all the expansions, we don't really know until Elizabeth sits down and designs them until we finalize those designs. So what we don't want to do is make a big box that doesn't actually hold everything or hold everything well. So eventually we will, but it will probably be quite some time before we do that. Brian says, have I tried playing on Board Game Arena? Yeah, this comment might be a little bit behind because I was just talking about that. How I played Russian Railroads on Board Game Arena last Thursday, to Terra Mystica before that. Alexandra says, have I read Dune? And just to let you guys know, Facebook is scrolling quickly. I'm going to miss some questions in a second. Just repeat them down below when I miss your question. But Alexandra says, have I read Dune? I haven't read Dune. I tried to, but I just couldn't get into it. Currently, I'm reading the Wheel of Time series. I finally decided to delve into that. But that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you all today. I had a great and interesting discussion with a book publisher recently, and I was surprised to hear the types of books that are selling really well right now. I kind of thought that all book sales would be up right now, given that people are in self-isolation, but that's not true. Only certain book categories are doing well. And I wanted to hear your thoughts. What are the last, have you bought any books during the pandemic? And what types of books were they? Feel free to name the specific books, but also the category. Have you been buying novels and fiction? Have you been buying a nonfiction like business books, self-help books? Have you been buying journals and diaries and books that you write into? Have you been buying books for your kids, children's books, workbooks, things like that? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about that. And later on, maybe I'll come back to it and let you know what this publisher told me has been selling really well recently. Adam says, would Stonemaier Games ever consider allowing digital playtest in regards to pitching games to your company? Yeah, we would. Yeah. It's not ideal. I mean, our typical process is that if we like a game submission, we will request, at a certain stage, we'll request a prototype and we'll get together and play it. From time to time, it has been helpful to just sit down digitally with a publisher and have them show us a game, not necessarily play through the whole thing, because like I've been saying on Tabletop Simulator, it can take a while to do that. But to sit down with a designer, have the designer kind of point out different features of the game, maybe walk us through a few turns so we get a feel of it. We are certainly open to that, but it still has to go through our normal design process or submission process. That wouldn't be like the first step, because your game might not fit our game design, our submission guidelines. So we got to get through those filters first. I'm sorry, Facebook is scrolling past a lot of questions here, so I'm definitely missing a bunch of them. Just repeat them below. I'm going to scroll forward so I don't get caught up in the fast scroll. So I just skipped like 20 questions. So repost your question below. I'm skipping forward to Betsy's question here, just a random stopping point. She says she's very new to board game design. Do I typically provide playtesters with many specific questions that I want feedback on, or is it better to keep it vague? So when I handle, yeah, that's a good question. So I handle two types of playtesting for our games. I handle some local playtesting with my coworkers, my friends that come playtest games. And usually for them, I might have a few specific things that I'm poking at with the game, but I also just want to get their general impressions. I ask them what was frustrating to them. I ask them what was most fun during the game. And I kind of pay attention during those playtests so that I can identify those things without them even having to tell me. And I asked those similar questions during the blind playtest. Blind playtest is when you send out prototypes to people around the world. They playtest on their own and report data back to you. And with those playtests, I asked for some anecdotal responses, like what was frustrating, what was fun, what seemed overpowered, underpowered. But I also asked for more, a lot of data-driven questions, like what faction won the game, what was the winner's score, how many players played, how long did the game take to play, things like that. JT says, what's still in shrink on my shelf? One game at the top of my shelf that is still in shrink. Oh, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a 2-player Cthulhu themed game. I'm blanking on it right now, but it's over there. Let's say I hear Megan scampering. Maybe she'll get it. It's right on top. The top layer. What is that one? Yeah, here's the one. The Seals of Cthulhu. Yeah, I'm intrigued by it because it is a 2-player game, and Megan is the only person allowed in my house right now. So we have been playing a lot of 2-player games. So this one is one that will probably hit the table pretty soon. I just have to learn it first. Stephen mentions that there was a nice interview Q&A by Tom Vassell of Elizabeth Hargrave a few days ago on YouTube. That's awesome. Yeah, I actually saw she was on another channel called Tea and Chit Chat, a channel that I was on, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago, and Elizabeth had an interview on there as well. Elizabeth is the designer of Wingspan. And I'm glad you said that, Stephen, because next Tuesday, in addition to running the next teach and play of Rolling Realms, I will also be joining Mike at the Dice Tower for a live chat at 8 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock St. Louis time. So feel free to join that. I think that'll be on the Dice Tower channel on YouTube. That's next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Rob says, am I planning any Wingspan expansions for New Zealand burgs? Yeah, Rob, actually, our next expansion for Wingspan is Oceania, which includes Australia and New Zealand. Kelly says, are there any upcoming new game announcements from Stonemaier Games in the near future? Yes, there are. Yeah, we have one new game that will be released in 2020, just one game this year. And that game I will start talking about in July. So we're coming up pretty soon. I mean, we're already through the middle of May, so that's coming up pretty soon now. Right now, we're still working on fulfilling orders for the Pie in the Sky expansion for My Little Scythe. So I think our fulfillment centers are finally catching up with that. They're running a little slow, a little behind, but they're working on it. Kurt says, will all Wingspan expansions play together? Yeah, that's a general Stonemaier Games philosophy. There are a few exceptions to that, but in general, we want our expansions to mix and match well together. Knowing that some people, like with Wingspan, you might buy Wingspan and you may not care about European birds for whatever reason, but you might really care about birds in Australia and New Zealand. And so we want that to be able to pair with a base game. But we also want people who have all the expansions to mash them all together and have a huge epic game if they want. It will be tough at some point to shuffle all the Wingspan birds together. So we're going to start to include a note in Wingspan expansion rules that says that we fully support people who just want to shuffle like one expansion's birds together with the base game. That is perfectly fine. It works perfectly fine. But if you want to shuffle everything together, you're welcome to do that as well. Chad says, just a friendly warning, if you want to get work done, don't play Animal Crossing New Horizons. He says he notices a lot of fail forward and other great tabletop mechanisms. Yeah, fail forward actually was what I talked about. Failing forward in cooperative campaign games was a big topic that some of you helped suggest games for that I covered in last Sunday's video. So if you look on our YouTube channel, the Jamie Stonemaier Games YouTube channel, you can see a video about failing forward in cooperative games. And what that means is, like, if you lose a scenario in a cooperative game, do you have to reset it and play it over again? Maybe you get a few little bonuses, but you ultimately have to replay the scenario. Or do you prefer to move forward with consequences? So maybe you are stronger now that you failed. Maybe you're weaker now that you failed. The story changes now that you failed, things like that. But ultimately you get to move forward along a different path into a new scenario rather than having to repeat the scenario. I have a strong preference there, but I did mention a few games where I am okay with repeat scenarios that I mentioned in that video. I also did videos on, what were the other videos I did this week? I didn't write those down. I did blog post, well, I'll come back to blog post in a minute, but what are my other videos? I did a video on Signori yesterday, which is a game, Euro game that I learned and played on Board Game Arena last week, thanks to Charles, who helped out with that, and Joe played along as well. But I'm blanking on the other video, the Friday video that I did. Let's see. Oh, and Chad asked, what recent game have I been inspired by? What have I been inspired by recently? Actually, Machikoro Legacy. There was a little mini game in it that gave me an idea for a mini game and another game that I'm working on. Matthias says, do I see myself in the future being the lead designer, developer designer on games on other media, like video games, escape rooms? Probably not. I'll probably stick with my core competency, which is designing and developing tabletop games. He also says, since I like traveling, have I ever considered visiting South America? The closest I've been to Central America. I've been to Mexico, but I haven't been to South America. I'd love to visit someday. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are some natural wonders there in particular and some wonderful people that I'd love to meet and love to see someday. Arian says, if I made a game on the Red Rising book, I think it's fairly well known now that I love the Red Rising series of books. Adrian says, if I made a game on the Red Rising book, what mechanisms would I use? Well, that's the big question, Adrian, that I tried to figure out for a long time and struggled to figure it out. For a long time, I tried bag building with lots of different meeples of different colors, and that didn't work. Couldn't get that to work. If you see people answering questions about books, it's because I asked like what types of books have you bought during the pandemic? I'm seeing some interesting questions here. A lot of fiction. I've seen a lot of fiction, some audio books. Noah recommends giving Dune another shot. Yeah, I'm certainly open to giving Dune another shot. The book, The Wheel of Time is going to take me a while to get through, but after that, maybe I will return to Dune and give it another try, because I have heard that people love the book. Scrolling down, reading the answers right now on what people said about books. Back to some questions here that I think I missed before. Again, feel free to repeat your question if I missed it, because Facebook does scroll past them if I don't say them fast enough. So let me give you, okay, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Kelly says, yeah, I'm getting back to the repeat questions still here. So you all are answering questions about books. Let me tell you what the book publisher told me that's selling well. There are two book categories that apparently are selling really well. One are journaling books on specific topics, like not quite self-help, but books that you can write in and write that give you like writing prompts or like deep questions about yourself to think about and write down. Apparently those books are selling very well right now. And workbooks for children are selling very well because I think parents are looking for ways to keep kids entertained and learning right now. And so those two categories are apparently doing very, very well right now. And this publisher is curious how long that'll last, if it'll last for a long time. But I thought that was really interesting. And he also said that there are certain other categories where sales are down, which surprised me because I kind of thought that all books would be up right now. Okay, repeated question. Brian says, have I ever played his favorite overall game, Seven Wonders? Oh yeah, I've played Seven Wonders many, many times. At this point, I may have played Seven Wonders Duel more, but I played Seven Wonders many, many times. What's your favorite expansion in it, Brian? I love the Leaders expansion. I love how it adds a fourth drafting round, so then you're balanced. You're drafting an equal number of times to the left as you are to the right. I really like that. Micah says, is there any chance that the Rise of Fenris will ever be added to either the Tabletop Simulator or to the Steam Digital Edition? I think someday, yeah, it'll definitely be added to the fully AI digital version of Scythe, the Rise of Fenris. Tabletop Simulator is a little tougher. They can be, like, we rely solely on them to incorporate our games, and so it's up to their schedule. I hope so, but they haven't done it yet, whereas they could have. So I don't know yet. I hope so, though. Let's see. Actually, I'm getting some interesting book recommendations here, too. Thank you for recommending that. Brian just mentioned an interesting book called Invisible Women. And Stephen, you recommended an interesting book that I scrolled past and didn't write down. So Stephen, if you want to repeat the book that you mentioned, it looked interesting to me and I should have written it down right away. Okay, Zach says, with Tapestry being his favorite game, oh, that's wonderful, Zach. Thank you for saying that. Would there be any games that I would recommend that have a similar feel? Yes, I would recommend A Feast for Odin, for sure. And Russian Railroads, which I mentioned earlier on this live cast, both have aspects of it that are a little similar to Tapestry. I also have one more on our website. I'll pull it up right now. I have like if you like these games, you like Tapestry, and I think the reverse works as well. I know I mentioned A Feast for Odin. Mombasa was the other one. Mombasa has some tracks that were inspired Tapestry. Brian says, have I tried the American or German expansions to Russian Railroads? I think I've played both, but the one that I know I've played for sure is the one that has different player mats, like variable player mats that start in different ways. I'm curious if that's on Board Game Arena, because I'd love to play that version. JT says, mysterious. It's interesting that a mysterious Cthulhu themed game would just show up on my shelf and there's only 2 of you in the house. Are you sure your cats aren't flirking? Yeah, I think I received this before the quarantine began, but we're still receiving packages in general, so I may have received it in the last month or so. Brian says, have I played the Serenity board game? I have not. No. I've been wanting to play a Firefly themed board game with Megan, because Megan loves Firefly, and I enjoyed it too. She introduced it to me. But we haven't played one yet. What would you say, for those of you who love Firefly, what is your favorite Firefly board game for 2 players? Let me throw out that restriction. A game that works well for Firefly for 2 players. Jim says, when I worked in the video game industry, we would do Kleenex testing, which is where you have someone playtest once and done to get the feedback as new players. Would that be useful for board game testing? Yeah, I mean, we essentially do that a lot with blind playtesters. Usually when I send out blind playtest games, or games for blind playtesting, they playtest it 3 times, and often with different people. So they're often getting feedback from just one person who's joining them from one session. But they report feedback after every session. So the first play of every wave is what, it's not one and done, it's one. And so I'm getting that one and done feedback, but they still then get to evolve and play it a second time in a third game. So I get different levels of play testing feedback there. JT says, can I set up a Facebook event for the Dice Tower chat next Tuesday? Yeah, next Monday I am going to make a post about the Rolling Realms playthrough on Tuesday and the Dice Tower chat on Tuesday. So you'll see a post on Facebook, on our Facebook page next week. I know that isn't exactly what you requested, but I just haven't had a great experience with Facebook event scheduling on our Facebook page. It doesn't seem to get the level of exposure that any random post on the page gets. I don't know why. So yeah, I'll probably just do a regular post. I'll put a note about that. Oh, today for lunch, I'm going to use Purple Carrot. Have any of you used Purple Carrot? It's a subscription service where they send you ingredients for several meals and then recipes on how to make those meals. And so I'm going to try that for lunch today for the first time. A friend sent us like a promo code that we could use to get a box for free. And I'm impressed with what it looks like. It looks like everything will be delicious. Everything did seem quite fresh when we received it. The price seemed a little high for us to continue to do it. It was like $70 for the box, but I'm curious how it goes. I'm curious if any of you have tried those types of meal prep services. I generally just like to cook whatever I want to cook. I don't like to be relegated to what someone else tells me to cook, but I'm curious about it. I'm curious to try and experiment with it. I'm curious if you've had experiences with those types of subscription services as well. It also seems a little wasteful from instead of me like walking down the street to the grocery store to have someone mail me those ingredients. Laura asked a question about code names, the code names for our games, which I don't talk about code names in advance. Matthew said there was a recent blog post in which I talked about there was this big question blog post where I talked about the idea that before I start any project or start anything new, I feel like I should ask myself, what if this actually works out? What if this gets big? What if I'm successful at this? In reference to like choosing a name for Instagram or choosing a component, which is what Matthew's talking about. So he says, I mentioned in this blog post that with the very original first printing of Viticulture, one that very few people have, there's only 2,500 copies of this version of Viticulture out there, and I used slightly thinner player mats than I should have. Later, for subsequent printings and the 100,000 copies of Viticulture that have come since then, we used the proper what I consider the proper thickness of the mats. But Matthew says, would I ever consider printing new mats with a recess for game components a la Scythe? I've thought about it, but I've polled people, and there hasn't been enough interest to justify a 1,000 unit print run in such components. And I think it would actually be more, I don't think it would be as good as in Scythe. I know like you don't want things sliding around on the mat, but you also want you want to be able to slide things around on the mats in viticulture. So like the biggest place would be on your, the glass tokens on the crush pad and your wine cellar, but it's actually really nice to be able to slide those tokens around, to just slide from 1 to 2 on the crush pad, to be able to slide from 3 on the crush pad over to 3 on the vineyard map rather than having to pick up the tokens. So I actually think that it's better that they're not recessed for player utility. But feel free to, Matthew, I could be wrong. So feel free to try to make one and see if you think I'm wrong about that. Make it and play with it and see if you prefer that to the original experience. I'd love to hear your feedback about that. Samson says that he just finished reading my book. Thank you, Samson, for checking out the book. I think you were the one that was reading it with or pretended to have your daughter read it, right? Your 2-year-old daughter. He says he definitely wants to know the next chapter, like what happened during the next 5 years. Do I plan on writing what happened after? My crowdfunding book actually ends with me saying, I have this project for Scythe coming up. I'm curious to see how it goes. So the book ends with that. I didn't know what would happen next. And what basically happened next was a very successful Kickstarter project with Scythe, and then we stopped using Kickstarter. Samson, I would say the best way to get that story right now is on the Stonemaier Games blog. You can go back in time and start with the blog entries that began with Scythe in like November, October 2015, and then move forward from there. Do I plan on writing the sequel? No, I don't have plans to do so, no. It does take quite a while to write a book, and it's not how I'm planning on using my time right now, but I do appreciate that you're interested in that, and maybe someday I will. I'm sure my agent would appreciate me to do that, but I don't have any plans to do so yet. Pete says, is there any news on the Scythe complete rulebook? And yeah, I was actually just emailing with Panda about that today. I think we are going to make it. It will be spiral bound, and we will release it later this year. I don't know exactly when yet, but sometime this year we will release it. And at the time that we release it, just to let you know, there was a small number of people who wanted a hardcover version of the rulebook, the complete rulebook. This is a rulebook that includes all rules from all things related to Scythe, along with all frequently asked questions and things like that, all in one rulebook. A small number of people said they wanted a hardcover version. I respect that. There weren't enough people for me to justify actually making a full print run of a hardcover version, which I would need to do. But we might make one in the future if, when we release this first version, if a lot of people report to us saying, I love this, but I would rather have the hardback version. If enough people say that, we will then make it. Nicole says, apologize for missing the beginning. When is the Rolling Realms playthrough? It'll be next Tuesday in the early afternoon. Let me get the exact time. I will post on the Stonemaier Games Facebook page the day before that to let you know the exact time. It'll be on 12:30 St. Louis time for Rolling Realms. I'm doing a lot of videos next Tuesday. I usually do I do 2 short videos and a Sunday sit-down video on Tuesday. And next Tuesday, I also have the Rolling Realms and a live chat at night. That'll be a busy video Tuesday. Allie recommends Keeper of the Lost Cities, which compares a little bit to Harry Potter, which is always a recommendation that I listen to. Keeper of the Lost Cities. We'll check that out. Jeremy says, am I still thinking about Red Rising as a game? It's still one of my favorite IPs, and one that I think a lot of people have discovered, but I think more people could. So I would still love to make a game in that universe someday. Yeah, even though my original designs didn't work out. Carol says, have I ever read The Dresden Files? She feels like that I would enjoy a wizard who starts with a sassy cat as his best friend. That does sound right up my alley. I have heard great things. I watched a recent interview with the author that I enjoyed. Really, at this point, the only reason that I haven't delved into it is the same reason that I didn't delve into The Wheel of Time, which is the daunting length of it. It's a long, ongoing series. And as far as I know, there isn't a definitive end to it yet. So maybe someday when it's over and I'm done with Wheel of Time and I've caught up with my other series, I will delve into it. But I have heard that people really love it, so I'd love to try it. JT says, what would I think of a My Little Scythe workbook for kids that includes math and English exercises? Sure, yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I don't have kids, so I don't know what kids really want, but that sounds like it could be neat. Yeah. Let's see. Jeremy also says that he's been playing Seven Wonders Duel, and he's still terrible at it. That's great. Brian says, have I played the Armada expansion to Seven Wonders? And I have not tried that. No, I haven't tried that one, Brian. Let me cover, before I finish up with questions, and I'm a little behind, so I might go a little bit long today, but let me see if I have anything else important that I needed to cover. I've been working on some game design stuff lately. I made actually really good progress on a game yesterday that I had a few hours to work on. We've been playtesting some stuff as well. I installed RAM on my computer the other day, some upgraded RAM, which led to a very scary moment where nothing worked, and then everything did work, and it's running faster, so that's good. I'm working on my shareholder report today. We have some people who have invested in Stonemaier Games, and every month I we talk a lot on an ongoing basis, but every month I try to give them an update about how we're doing and things, future plans that I want them to know about, and I want them to talk about with me and share their opinions. Shareholders they've been great at offering their insights into the Stonemaier Games process. We bought a new VR game the other day called Supernatural, which is kind of like a combination of Beat Saber and Box VR. And it's been quite a workout, like right on this part of your arm. Been really feeling that. And the last thing, what was the last thing? Oh, Ovi. Ovi, who can't attend these things live, just a Stonemaier Games fan, asked me to, he said that he thinks a lot about board games, and he muses about them a lot, but he tries to strike a nice balance with his wife or girlfriend about how much he actually talks about game design with her, because he knows that it's not something that she thinks a lot about. She does enjoy games, but he doesn't know. He tries to strike that balance of how much is okay to talk about in terms of board game design and musings with a significant other. And he asked me if I do the same thing with Megan, if I try to strike a nice balance there. And the answer is certainly yes. Like I don't want to bore Megan or really anyone with topics that they're not interested in. So sometimes when we're just sitting around and we have nothing else to talk about, I will let her know that I've been thinking about this problem. And I usually try to get her insight into it in a way that she may have already thought about. For example, she used to play a lot of World of Warcraft, and I'm designing a big open world game. Not exactly like World of Warcraft at all, really. It isn't. It's very different, but there are some elements. So every now and then I'll say, okay, I'm struggling with this element of my open world game. How does it work in World of Warcraft? What did you like about this, or what did you not like about it? And I get her thoughts on it there. So as I'm using about board games with her, I do try to connect them with something that she knows, or that's something that she is or was interested in at a certain point in time. Actually, I wonder if am I running two live streams right now? I don't know. I'll have to see that. I see that I'm kind of recording on two different tabs right now. So I wonder if I have two live streams, and maybe I'm missing a whole separate series of questions somewhere. I might be. I don't know. I can't really tell. I don't want to mess it up now by deleting either one. But if I totally missed your questions, because I have two tabs open with two different live videos going, oddly enough. The Art of Learning is the book that Stephen mentioned before. Thank you, Stephen, for repeating that. The Art of Learning. Adam says, any new book series that I've recently enjoyed? Well, right now I'm reading The Wheel of Time. So I'm still finishing up book one. I'll soon be finished with book one, and I am enjoying it. As others have mentioned, I love pretty much anything that Brandon Sanderson does. So if you're looking for a great series, my favorite of his is the Mistborn series. But I think ultimately my favorite will end up being his the series that starts with The Way of Kings, the Stormlight Chronicles. So I highly recommend both of those if you have the chance to check them out. Oregon mentions that I could sell, Stonemaier could sell a card shuffler for all the different cards in Wingspan. Maybe someday. I mean, maybe that would be an important part of the organizer that we someday sell for for Wingspan, because there will be so many cards. It's tough to shuffle that many cards. It's already tough to shuffle the cards in Wingspan. Mandy recommends the book The Iron Druid Chronicles. I think I've seen that. I think I have like a Kindle sample of that I need to check out at some point. And her favorite Firefly game is Firefly the game, the actual game. I think there's like a deck building game, and then there's the game, and there's Shiny Dice, which other people have mentioned. Jake says, to add on to the question about Fenris being added to the tabletop simulator, but that you're waiting on them, do they also have Visit from the Rhine Valley in their queue to add to the Viticulture DLC? I love the base game and more cards, but I'd love to have the extra variety. I don't think they do. Maybe I need to just send them an email and see what they're working on and see what they might be willing to add to our games right now. So thank you for that reminder. I think they went through somewhat of a restructuring, and there was really bad communication for a while, but now they are emailing much faster than normal. So, or at least than what I'm used to. So I'll send them a note and see what they're up to with our various games. Mackenzie says that they tried HelloFresh, which is a similar service to Purple Carrot. And she says it was a little expensive, but it was nice to have less planning, and it was generally healthier than getting stuff last minute. I can totally see that. It is definitely healthier than the stuff that we've been ordering from restaurants recently. JT says, a business request. Would I consider pulling together my blogs on social media into a book for managing social media presence or even management? He says, my crowdfunding book was successful and helpful even in my corporate work, and I'm finding that social media management changes faster than I can keep up. That's a great question. I don't know if I quite have enough topics or like articles written about social media management to do that, but I could certainly consider it. I think one of the nice things about my crowdfunding book is that it tells a story. Like I'm kind of telling my story throughout, and I think that makes it easier to read rather than a book that just says, here's how I do things, X, Y, Z, step 1, step 2, step 3, which I worry that a book about such a specific topic would end up being that rather than being like more narrative, which I think is more palatable for a book like that. But I appreciate the idea. I'll have to go back and look at how many blog entries I've written on that subject to see if it's even close to being enough to boost them into a book. But you can also just look on, if you look on our website under the full Kickstarter lessons list, there is, I think, a section on either marketing or social media. So you might be able to look at those blog posts all together in one place there. Cody, as usual, comes through with a link. Thank you, Cody, for doing that. I really appreciate that. Stephen says, in reference to my blog on what if this gets big, what if this works out, he says, it was interesting to hear Elizabeth Hargrave on Tom Vassel's Dice Tower interview talking about her original aspirations for Wingspan. She said 5,000 copies would have been great for a first game, which is totally true. 5,000 copies is a lot of copies of a game, especially for a first-time designer. And apparently she was a little surprised when I first said 10,000 as my goal for any first print run. And that's true. Yeah, 10,000 is the minimum that I'd like to print for any first print run of any game to give it a chance to even get big. I think 5,000 can be a little limiting at times in terms of the exposure it can get, the number of people that can have access to it and that can share it with their friends. So we usually set 10,000 as the threshold, and that's what we printed for the first printing of Wingspan. And now we're coming up on, I think by the end of the year, we'll be maybe close to 500,000 copies of Wingspan, which is amazing, which is ridiculous. I don't think I ever thought that we printed that many copies of any game. Dan says, what is my view on Hell, H-E-E-L, which is a game that went live on Kickstarter, I believe, yesterday. And honestly, Dan, I haven't really looked at it, and I should have, because I do try to stay on top of games on Kickstarter, even if they're those that I may not delve too deep into. Seems like a darker theme, which is why I honestly didn't really look into it all that much. But I need to do that. Thank you for the reminder. I will go and look on the Kickstarter page after this. Tony says, have I seen the Sea of Legends pirate-themed sandbox game on Kickstarter? I have seen it. Yeah, I watched a playthrough from the designers who looked like very nice people playing through the game. Looked like a fun game. He says, I know that you've mentioned that $70 or more is more than I'd like to spend on a game, especially one that hasn't really been released yet, basically. And this one is $150. And he says, wonder if I've seen it or what types of things would push your game purchase ceiling higher than usual. Some beautiful components certainly can do that. But I think it would take a really, really special game for me to consider that. One that I think doesn't have any comparison in the marketplace, or maybe one from a designer that I truly love. Yeah, I mean, it's happened very rarely that I've done that. I think for a long time, the game that I purchased, I think I've only purchased like really a few games that have been over that amount on Kickstarter, and those were Zaya and what was the other one? There was one other one. I did back the original Gloomhaven campaign, the very, very first Gloomhaven campaign. And Rising Sun, I think, was very expensive because I love the Japanese theme. I love the look of it. The designer is someone that I really admire. So yeah, it takes a lot. It takes a combination of a lot of different factors for me to do that. And also probably a time where I maybe haven't backed a lot of other games around that time. I did back Reckoners too. I think Reckoners was up there. Matthias says that his group really enjoys conflict and take that in games. He says he's only managed to play one Stonemaier game that has direct conflict or combat. That's Scythe. What do I think of heavy conflict take that in games? Will I ever consider any of those mechanisms for my games? It certainly is not my preference. I don't gravitate towards those games. I don't design many games with combat or direct conflict, things where you can hurt your opponent. That's the thing that I stay away from. I don't generally like mechanisms where you can just directly hurt a specific opponent or even all opponents. Because I usually when I have those cards in games or when I have those possibilities, I don't feel good when I do them. I even avoid playing those cards. But that said, there are games with combat that I like, or games with high player interaction. I have a video about it. Maybe Cody can find that real quick. Some games with high player interaction that I really enjoy. There are a few of them. Kemet is the one that often comes to mind as a game that is based around combat that I really do enjoy. Adrenaline is another one. I think Adrenaline does some really cool things to make me not feel bad when I fight a specific other player in the game. Brian says, do I listen to any board game podcasts? I do. Yeah, I subscribe to like hundreds of them. I don't listen to every podcast that comes through my feed every day. The ones that I listen to the most consistently are probably the Board Game Design Lab, which I have up right now, an open tab. I have the Secret Cabal. I've listened to most of the stuff that they produce, and the Co-op Cast, also known as the One Stop Co-op Shop. They have a fantastic podcast about cooperative games. Kyle says, when am I going to make a Wheel of Time game? That will probably never happen, but it's just too big of a series to encapsulate into a board game, I think. But I am enjoying reading the first book right now. Jay says, would I consider Rolling Realms to be its final version? I don't know, Jay. I'm at the 10th version now. I'm pretty happy with it. So I think so, but we'll see how the playthrough goes on Tuesday. I'm getting close to the end of the feed here. Let me see if there's any other topics that I missed. I think I covered everything. Yeah, I think I've caught up. I'm sorry if I missed your question today. There was a point where Facebook was scrolling a little bit too quickly. Here's a question. Cody says, how does Stonemaier Games take into consideration public literacy levels when designing games? That's a great question, Cody. And honestly, as much as I think about accessibility in games, I haven't actually thought all that much about literacy. I think the main way that I think about them is from a perspective of, can this game, like how young can a person be to play this game? For example, I am working on a game right now that really requires individual players to read text that other players cannot see. I know as I'm designing it that will exclude a certain age group that just can't read the cards or can't read the components. But that also is not my target age group for the game. And so Cody, in terms of adults who can't read very well, that is a problem that I have not faced. And perhaps I should have thought about, or should think a little bit more about that. But I also don't know if it's a problem that I can solve. And I think if I tried to make our games more accessible for adults who can't read or who can't read well, that would maybe really limit those games for everyone else who can read well. I think there are exceptions to that, but say like we tried to design. What if we tried to design Wingspan for someone who can't read? Is someone who can't read well, are they going to even give Wingspan a try in the first place? Probably not. And if they do, and if we did design around that, it would be hugely limiting for the game. We wouldn't be able to have all these special powers without using a ton of icons and a big page to explain what those icons mean, which requires more text, which means that they still can't read that. So Cody, I don't know. I think I will continue to think of it in terms of age, and think about it in terms of can the components that I'm reading, that I need to read, can other players at the table read them for me? And that can be a way that I can include more people in it. But there will still be specific instances where private information is just necessary for the game to be fun and for the game to work. And in those cases, it is going to exclude some people who can't read at a certain reading level. Ilya says, what is my most sold game? The game that we've sold the most copies of at this point is Wingspan. Wingspan recently passed Scythe in terms of total units sold. Chad says, what game have I played for the first time and said, dang, I love this game? Has it maintained its rank for you? What was the one recent? I mean, I've played a lot of games recently that are in the category. Shards of Infinity is probably that game so far, or the most recent game for that. Shards of Infinity. I really, really loved my first play of it, and I've loved plays of it ever since. George says, have I seen the new Railroads Inc. on Kickstarter now? I have, yeah. I saw that yesterday. He says, I love how they interact with backers by creating cool mini games for unlocking different stretch goals. I think this is a new trend. What do I think? I saw the project. I didn't back it, but I love the idea that they're interacting with backers in an interesting way. So I'm going to go take a second look at that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, George. Yeah, I'll check that out. Kurt says, will Wingspan expansion be on Kickstarter? No, Kurt, nothing that we do will be on Kickstarter. We stopped using Kickstarter way back in 2015. So now our method is that we just make stuff, and we have pre-orders for that stuff when we already have it. So you don't have to wait 8 or 12 months to get a new product from us. We just make the best possible version of that product, and we have it ready for you when we tell you about it. All right, I think we're at the end here. Good time, actually, perfect time here. Just ran out of questions, just ran out of topics. So I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you next Wednesday, or maybe next Tuesday for some of those live chats next Tuesday. Take care.